All right. Hello, good morning or evening, and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. We're here today with Andrew, Powell, and Craig, and we may have a couple others come join us today. I think we're mostly going to take questions from the audience, but there are a couple interesting things that we wanted to talk about, including the kind of super sexy new AI that Andrew's inviting into his home soon, right? Anyway, we'll be diving into that stuff, some game dev topics and other things, but welcome everybody. If you're here with us live, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and say hello. And if you have questions about just general game development, programming stuff, art, any of that, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll take them as they pop up. Kind of as quick as they pop up, probably. So, yeah, good morning, everybody. I'll let y'all say hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Before we go into topics, there were a couple things that were going on. There's an update of the new Publisher of the Week, a free art asset that was what's that character called again? I lost the name of it. I just missed the Proto Factor assets last week, so I tried to share that out. Oh, it's a Sea Princess. That's what it was. I knew it was some sort of princess, but you missed the Proto Factor ones. I'm sorry to hear that, but there's one up here right now. Don't forget to check it out every week. And also they did a 30 for 30 bundle that just came out where it's 30 assets for $30. I'll link that in the description. It's also in the chat. It's a good deal though. A lot of the stuff on there I already have and paid $30 for individually. So I recommended it if you don't have it. Take a look. There's a lot of good stuff in there though. It was normally I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I wouldn't use. This one felt like there was a lot more that I would use than average. I probably use like more than half of the things in this pack. So go check that out. And then Andrew had some updates. He's been doing the game modules. I'm going to give you a second to just kind of tell everybody about that. And I don't think you've really talked about who game modules is for before, or at least not recently. Like, I mean, I know on your channel you do, and in the past, long past you have, but you tell everybody what the game modules for actually is and why it exists.
So I guess the short-ish elevator pitch is it's a data manipulation tool. It's very core. It's got a lot of systems though that are built on top of that. So if you're going to build a very simple game like Flappy Bird, this is not for you. If you're going to build an RPG or a game that has stats that influence each other, equipment that influences stats, attributes that change equipment, things like that, then this is more for you. It is a slightly different way of organizing what you would otherwise just script out into a list of properties and classes. It's easy enough to make a stats class and make stats, and whether you make those scriptable objects or whatever you want to do, there's lots of ways you can do that. This allows you to just create them by typing the names in, clicking the button, and now you've got scriptable object stats that work directly with all the other things like item objects, item attributes, quests, lookup tables, and there's other things like there's a player, a demo, not really a demo, there's a pre-made player class as well. So if you want to use that, it automates everything. So for an example, let's say a player equips into their equipment list a new sword or a new shield or a new other object. The stats that thing affects automatically get updated. You don't actually have to do any coding. It just works. So as long as your UI is, linking into that stat, as long as your math on the damage links into those stats, then it's just going to work. And yeah, if you're making a Flappy Bird Barbarian game, then you probably need this.
I feel like it's more useful if you want to build some sort of an RPG or something that has characters and items and stats, like as a standard. Like it's kind of like it's got all of those systems built together to work. And then on top of it, from what you could probably talk a little bit more about it. You got the visual stuff with all the character models, right?
Yeah, I mean, it works, of course, really well with my entire series. I made it for my own game, so everything I make is for my own game. I'm very selfish in that way.
It's dogfooding. It's important because if you're not making it for your own game, then you're making it for nobody. So making it for your own game helps a lot because then you see all the problems and all the deficiencies and actually have to fill them.
And plus, that's going to be supported because I'm going to keep
Yes.
improving it. I will say though, it is more for than just it's great for RPGs. It doesn't fantasy RPGs, sci-fi RPGs, any RPG, but it also could be great for tower defense games because these are things where you might have an object, a player character, which is in this case a tower that has stats, that has conditions, that has quests, that has all those things you might find in another game. You can easily use it for a tower defense game and make your towers interactable in that way with different conditions and whatnot. I made it originally because I was looking at the other options on the asset store on how to kind of speed up the development of an RPG because I didn't want to do it all myself. But I found that the other options out there seemed to be a bit opinionated where I couldn't exactly make the game I wanted to make. And I'm making a game that's a portrait-based 4-player first-person RPG where that genre is not popular right now. So there are no things out there. But RPG Builder, which is very powerful, has tons of systems, lots of people use it. If you're not making a third-person RPG, you're going to have to fight that system. You're going to have to rework it in order to make it work for your game. I didn't want to have to rely on somebody else's system that I would have to rework. I've been down that path before. And so I wanted to make a system that was very non-opinionated and very flexible. So Game Modules is extremely flexible. The demo game that comes, it's a separate package, but it's made with it is my game essentially. It's a 4-player first-person RPG. And it's
like a Might and Magic style, right?
Like a Might and Magic 6, 7, 8 style, yeah. Or I guess the old ones too, but 6, 7, 8 is visually where it's at. And so you can see the entire operations there. But ultimately, just because the demo is a first person or an RPG, it can really be used for anything.
Now, before we get into bigger questions, there was one about it is Game Modules 4. It's just the 4th version, right? You don't need
the 4th version. Yeah. The first version was meant to be more like Game Creator, where there are actual separate modules, but then I decided that was a terrible way to go. It was very annoying as a developer for me to operate. And Game Modules 2 then was the first one that brought them together, I think. And then quickly I went to Game Modules 3, which changed things. And then that was around for a while. It still is on the store for people who have it because they can still use it. But then Game Modules 4 was a complete rewrite that broke everything because I needed to break everything to move on, basically.
Yeah, that's understandable and means that you can keep the other versions around for the people that built on it, do updates and stuff if needed. On one
3 works perfectly fine for those who are still using it. It's just 4 is way better and faster and automated.
Nice. All right. Well, let's jump into some questions. There's a good one right here at the top that I think is worth talking about. They were wondering how you upgrade your skills after you get a job in the industry. Do you let your work tasks dictate what you learn, or do you find extra time to kind of learn outside of work? And where do you go about that? Like, what's the process? I've got a lot of opinions on this, but I'm curious who wants to jump in first, who's got some thoughts.
Well, I'll jump in. I mean, it's a mixture of both, right? You do let your job, what you need to learn for your job, kind of drive what you're learning at the moment. And especially if I know that there's something coming up that I'm going to be working on that I'm not particularly strong in. The company I work for, they'll provide different courses and stuff, but I also look for courses on my own, like Pluralsight courses or even LinkedIn Learning. If you have a premium account on LinkedIn, there's some good courses up on LinkedIn Learning. And of course, doing game dev.
When do you do that? You do that on your own time at home or at work? Or?
Yeah, so at lunch or on my own time. I can't really do it at work time. I'm busy working at work, but I mean, they do allow you to do some training during work time. But most of the time for the courses and stuff that I do, it's on my own time.
Okay. Is it mostly like online, kind of doing some coursework stuff and other things? Yeah. And you're saying that you're picking it from like what you think is coming up, or if you can?
Yeah, if I know that, so like, when I first started moving into the React space, I hadn't done a lot of React. So I started doing some courses on that. I've been mostly a back-end guy for most of my career. So when I started doing web development, I'm doing courses on CSS and stuff and, just basic stuff just to get me up to speed. But I'm, fortunately been able to work with people that if I do get stuck on something, I can usually get an answer pretty quick. And if there's something I see that I still need a little bit of reinforcement in, I'll go and look for a course on it.
Yeah, that is a good point. I think that you mentioned kind of the other people, because that's one of the best places to kind of keep upgrading your skills is with the other developers on the team. If you don't have a culture where everybody's kind of afraid to talk and show their stuff, if they're willing to give positive feedback and you have those good relationships, you can actually get really good really fast that way, just from getting info from those people. I mean, obviously you got to get some info from outside places as well, and that really depends on the environment and the actual team. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's important. When Paul, Andrew, you guys got any?
I do my work during the day, and then at night I make game stuff and get better that way. And one time I did join this guy's course. I used to watch this guy on YouTube a lot. And I decided to join his course, and I never finished the course, but that's how I met Jason and other people here. And so it worked out well. I've learned a lot from it, even though I never finished the course. It was the game architect course from Weimann here.
Oh, okay. There's a new one opening up right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty busy, so maybe I won't join it. But I was a little annoyed. My company was supposed to pay for the course, and then my manager at the time said, "Oh no, we're not paying for you to have that course," and so I just paid for it. But whatever, it's fine. I got my money's worth.
No reimbursement. It's always good when the company's reimbursed.
Yeah, see if your company reimburses it, and then work out a sweetheart deal with somebody and say, "Give me a kickback." Just kidding. Don't do that. That's probably illegal. Jesus.
Pal, what you thinking? Oh, you're muted. Hold on. There you are. Now what are you thinking? Now that you're not muted.
Yeah, so mostly I try to do two things. One is learning new stuff for the assets. So one is with my job. So new technical stuff, programming, as much as I can take mostly to get 1 or 2 new skills each month. And separate from that, in free time, I'm always having some audiobook I'm playing during walking, during driving, that also teaches me new things about game dev or things that are connected, but are not the same things I'm learning during my work on assets. So I try to learn about 12 to 20 things a year that I didn't know before this year. This is
nice. Do you keep track of those?
Yeah, I mostly keep tracking what I'm learning, what I'm changing. I have big list of trainings I done, the new things I learned. I always give it to my library of things I have done each year, and then going forward with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. At work, you have a personal development plan, and you work with your manager. And if there's something they want you to, that you're interested in, some technology you want to move into or whatever, they'll provide opportunities for you to learn those.
Now, Yorai, welcome. And do you know the question already and have thoughts on it, or you want to read it out?
I already read it, and I do have some thoughts on it. As far as my own training goes, I basically passively read about whatever takes my interest every day in the few minutes that I wake up before I get out of bed. And sometimes when I just sit down and I have like a burning question, so I'll go read the entire documentation and try to find whatever answers that. And if I can't, I go on the forums, and if I can't go there, I start reading whatever source code of the things that I'm working with. If it's a topic that's not related to programming, I just do whatever I can to self-learn and see the underlying science. So for example, this year I started focusing on personal health. So I started learning the entire system with insulin, leptin, trying to control the body a bit better. In regards to programming and work skills, I will mostly dictate what I am learning based on what my work needs. The game Terraria has been out for many years now, but we keep getting like new requirements and things that could be better. So it involves a lot of personal research of going to see what other games are doing, learning from the best parts of each and every one of them, considering what is compatible with each other, constructing best solutions, understanding how to construct each component of the best solution, understanding why the component is done that way, see if there is a different way that would work better that's just not mentioned or seen in those solutions, then trying to redo that in a playground that I'm comfortable with, and then bringing it into the work environment, usually. So it's a pretty elaborate process, but it's relatively easy. You just see, oh, that looks pretty good. Make a note, figure out, okay, how do you do thing? Then you just implement thing where you feel comfortable, and then you implement thing where you actually need the thing. And this iteration is so that when it's actually in the work product, it's in the best quality it can be, because you're going to get review from others, but you have the ability to review the thing yourself. In fact, if you've been looking at other things first, you have like a baseline of what is an acceptable quality. If you see something that's 100% and you're making something that's 60%, you know that 60% is 60%. Which is
can you give a more like a concrete example for people on some of the stuff maybe who haven't been in the scenario before, or not a concrete, but maybe a more direct example on something like that? And then I have another question too that I want to ask you, but keep going.
So let's say you have a player that can cast spells, Fireball being a classic. If you have just learned how to create a projectile in a game, your first intention would be make projectile go in a straight line in constant speed, eventually hitting thing, immediately disappearing, and damage appearing. Logically, it does what it needs to do. Gameplay field, it has nothing. So many games would do something like adding a particle effect when the fireball hits the enemy, so that you get a fireball explosion, even if it doesn't hurt the nearby enemies or impact the environment or anything like that. It's a feel thing. You do a particle effect, but that particle effect will also be in linear speed if you're making your first particle system. So now you get to learn about like easing in and easing out of certain things, making scale go up and down, or pulse, or changing the color and opacity of the effect. And the fireball itself can actually have a very fast initial velocity and then slow down and fizzle out as it actually reaches near its max distance. It can also have a trail effect going when it's moving around. You can also do certain things for like what happens if you're firing it at a close distance enemy. Do you want to actually play a different effect altogether? This is something that is not visible in most games, but some effects will actually do that. League of Legends comes to mind with a character named Thresh will have different attacks based on if the enemy is close or not. Rakan too. He has a cape that he would usually lash at people, but if they're close, he's going to punch them. So it's the kind of thing that's like, it doesn't impact gameplay, but it feels different and it feels smart to do when you're doing the thing. So
all right. I assume some of the other things are more performance related too, or tying in with other systems, doing things different ways. I had a question I wanted to ask you, because I know you've got more than just yourself working on game stuff. Do you guys have, or is there some policy in place there where you kind of encourage learning or promote that learning, or is there some like practice or thing that you do regularly or would recommend you've seen work maybe that like helps the rest of the team grow? Because I mean, it's always easy to like, hey, go learn on your own, but is there something you do to like, you know, make that work for other people as well? I'm curious if you got ideas.
So we do multiple things as far as the logic goes. We have a channel in the thing that we use for communication, which is basically called Technobubble. And in Technobubble, you share other things that are of interest that are technologically related. So for example, .NET articles about how the new version of .NET does some sort of optimization to something that we've been thinking is the best way to do things, but has actually been terrible until we upgrade to that version, which we can't do because we're stuck on XNA.
Okay.
Another example is if we have a topic that we're not entirely sure on, we'll discuss it there sometimes. We will discuss things as low as what does the JIT actually do for you, like compiling, lowering, seeing what actually happens to a method that we write in certain .NET versions and in certain scenarios that we need things to happen. So for example, we had a bizarre scenario where we wanted to make something that was previously constant be static read only and initialized at runtime, but then something else referenced it. It was also in the static initializer, and apparently the order matters. So you can get into an invalid situation if suddenly something changes there. So we had to start figuring that out. Other than that, we did have some dedicated time where everybody's like, okay, stop and go learn that kind of thing. And we're going to share whatever information we can too, but you need to like go and read that specifically because we want somebody to be able to help on certain projects. So like go get the context, understand what is happening. If you don't know anything, tell us, we'll help you out. Other than that, we do all have like personal projects. So for example, one of the team members mods Minecraft a lot. So he gets whatever knowledge he has in that space. I do a lot of Unity stuff. I do some Flutter stuff too. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. So side projects are a good one and heavily encouraged, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, we have fun just talking about them and like sometimes giving advice.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of force you to constantly be learning too. And a couple other things that are easy to do. Podcasts. I always listen to podcasts like I'm driving far distances. I've heard music a million times. So if there's anything interesting I can use to learn, or like on airplanes and books, I'll grab them. And like you said, when I'm laying down reading, I'll lay down in bed and just read for a little while, or on a plane or something. And then talking to other people, I think is the other one, like actually talking, showing your code to people. If you can get into a like technical mastermind group of other people that are kind of in that same mindset, working on projects and trying to learn stuff too, it can be a good place to just go talk regularly about random tech stuff. I mean, one of the reasons I love doing the show so much is that I also get to learn and be exposed to constantly like new tech stuff, new problems, new ideas and solutions for stuff. So it works out great. So I recommend podcasts, all that kind of stuff, and meetups as well. I actually just scheduled next week's meetup and going to Dave's. I just realized Dave's is literally right the day before mine, so I'm going to be back to back. Wife's going to love it.
Lunch and learns are good too. Yeah, at our job we have lunch and learns, and they'll even send DoorDash coupons for those of us that are remote. And somebody will share on a topic and demo code and everything. And we have hackathons. We just had a hackathon a couple of weeks ago. Where you can pretty much work on anything you want. It can be work related, or it could even be non-work related, as long as it's a technology that you could apply to work in some way.
Yeah, or possibly apply sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes you don't know exactly how it would apply, but you got some ideas. Like I know some guys who did some of that stuff with quite a few who did Unity stuff on the side, investigating in their little hacks, and then ended up bringing them into enterprise places as other applications when they realized that they could kind of solve other problems that other departments were having that needed visualization, from design to training, and even really cool like giant screen visualization stuff. Lots of cool stuff. Cool. Anybody got other thoughts on this stuff, on time and when and where to learn, or should we go on to the next one?
So there is one more thing that I probably should mention. I am in many communities that are about modding games and general programming, especially Unity programming, and seeing people who have complex problems and them trying to solve it helps a lot. and it also lets you join in and try to contribute. And when you join in and get to contribute, it feels like you're both solving things together and you're actually like increasing each other's skills exponentially. So in Jason Story's server, there are a lot of discussions about bizarre things and things that don't work right. We spent a whole night at one point trying to figure out how does the new spline package give you a proper tangent vector when you're using a fully linear spline, because apparently it goes to 0 in certain situations, and then you need to use something else. But how do you get something consistent? So we started coming up with like a ton of solutions, and none of them are correct or good, but one of them seems consistent enough, and I'll take it.
I just linked that in chat for everybody listening to. If you want to go join Stories Discord, I definitely recommend it. It's just a good place to lurk and kind of watch some of those discussions too. Even if you're afraid to get involved in them, you can just go watch and kind of pick stuff up, seeing everybody else talk, or you can just jump in. Dom wants to see an episode of Purely Tips, like the one with Story and Uri a while back. We should definitely do that again sometime. By the way, I wanted to mention an important change on the show scheduling. We're going to be moving the time to one of these weekend days. It'll either be Saturday or Sunday next week. So
Did he freeze?
Yep, the
some
internet
up
did not.
and a couple up on weekdays will be able to come. So should be fun. I'll send out an email, and then if just make sure you're subscribed, I'll schedule it in advance so everybody gets the alert.
Is that a one-off or is that
part
going to
of
be a
that.
new schedule?
I think it'll probably be a new schedule. We just got to get it figured out and make sure it's going to work right for everybody. I'm going to move the student calls to right before it too, on the weekend, the same day. I was trying really hard for a while to avoid working on weekends, but that just doesn't actually work. I've realized that it's just, that's just not me. I like what I do too much.
On the topic of working on weekends, I literally closed off a working week last night, and today I was like, I have a new idea to do a thing, and I just ended up spending like multiple hours doing the thing. That's a work thing, but I just spent multiple hours.
You had the idea, and you got to try it and see if it works, and see if it comes out exactly how you pictured it.
and it's the smallest thing. So I got a Steam Deck today, and I was like, I'm gonna try Terraria on the Steam Deck. And in the first 5 minutes, I got enough new ideas that I could probably fill a work week with them. But I was like, this is the one thing that is going to improve the experience so much. I'm gonna try it. And then you end up like going, it's going to be a 20-minute thing. And then you realize there's a hinge in the code. And you're saying, okay, I'm going to undo that hinge. And then it's going to be like, oh, okay, we're going to be here for the next 4 hours trying to fix this, aren't we?
Somebody was asking me the other day, I was telling them, they were asking, how's your game going? I was like, well, or how long does it take you to finish a game? Is what he asked. And I laughed. I was like, well, I started this one 7 years ago, right before I got my day job. And then I got the day job, and that, slowed everything down. But, and I was explaining to him that realistically, if I didn't have to have a day job, if I just had a trust fund, I'd still just be doing this, and I'd be doing it on nights and weekends and weekdays and anytime, because I like doing it.
No, you would. You'd probably just be doing it like all day long for your day too.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is what I would do for fun. I would take breaks, of course.
You would probably just end up hiring your friends to come work on it.
If my trust fund was big enough, I would hire people to do stuff. Yes.
Yeah, but, that's literally like what every game dev that gets way too much money does. Yeah. That's ashes of creation. Although they've got a really cool game, looks like. Rich dude who wants to make an awesome game.
Yeah,
that would be you.
If in that light of things, is it really working on a weekend? If you're just if that's what you're doing for fun, like other people go to the farmers market. I don't like farmers markets.
So I have something very important to say here.
Okay.
Work is work, and work has a different standard than what you do for fun. If you're doing something for fun, you get to stop when it's not fun. If you're doing something for work, you need to make sure if it's delivering value to whatever end user ends up using it, so you cannot stop when the fun ends.
That is mostly true.
But if you got $1 billion, then you can stop whenever you want and just start again. That's what Andrew needs is the $1 billion.
When I was young, I thought about being rich, but then I went and tried to be an actor instead. So
bad decision.
Yeah, I decided
should have gone the other route. I feel like that's at least half the game devs I know. Like if they just got rich, they would open a studio in their backyard and make the game that they want to make just for fun, and they would probably spend most of their time just working. But I don't know about you guys, but in my experience, game dev is like the only place where people do exactly what I did, where you go home and you're like, oh, I want to do this thing real quick, and they start working on stuff. Like with enterprise, it happened to me maybe like a handful of times. With game dev stuff, I felt like it was pretty much nonstop. The enterprise, it would have to be like some really cool new tech that I just really wanted to play with. But even then, I'd probably just usually hold off until Monday.
So, that would make sense because in games you're doing creative work and you're trying to come up with like unsolved possibility space. But in enterprise, it's what the problem is. You just need a working path with a known solution possibly to it. So there isn't a lot of creativity space there.
Yeah.
If I didn't have game dev on the side, I seriously think I would burn out as a software developer. But being able to do game development on the side and work on my own projects kind of reinvigorates me to come back to work. I can work on something different, tackle different problems, do something fun that I'm interested in, and then I'm ready to come back and work on the day job.
I don't know what I would do every night if I wasn't also making games. I mean, I would probably try to play games, but I need more friends.
You could watch reality shows.
Oh, I could watch TV. That's right. I don't watch TV. So that is one thing I don't really do. I watch probably like 2 hours a month of TV on average, maybe 4 hours.
You could talk to an AI.
That's a very private thing these days.
In regards to playing games, there are a lot of games that have like huge community. You can just hop on and find people to play with, and sometimes they would be people who are with the exact vibe as you do. As you have. So I do recommend trying it out once in a while, especially if the game has multiplayer. There are many single player games that are great, or multiplayer games that you can enjoy on your own. You don't necessarily need the multiplayer aspect to enjoy a game. In fact, I'm very careful about multiplayer games these days, because if a multiplayer game is really only fun when it's with friends, then is the game actually really good? Because friends are fun by default. So
That's an interesting way to decide if a multiplayer game is fun. If it can be fun without the multiplayer part,
or without them being friends, with them being just randos. The hard part is them being interactive. Like with friends, you have like that base like level of people are going to interact, and they're generally going to interact in a way that's at least socially acceptable for the group, whatever that is. Could be very nice to each other, or it could be teenage boy level, but it'll fit and it'll match.
There is also a lot of like technical aspects to consider. So some games do a very good job at keeping the players together and giving them tools to communicate what they need to do, or aligning their behavior together. Some other games would not do that and would actually encourage detrimental activities towards each other, or splitting off, which is the worst case scenario, because now you're just playing single player with lag. So this is like one of the worst problems that I see in sandbox games, where it's like an open world and go do whatever you want. Most players would choose, by default, from what I'm observing, to go in separate directions. Now, that means they get to cover more content quickly, and they still get to meet at base and like maybe trade items or share whatever wealth they got. But it also means they're basically playing single player with trading. Whereas most other games that have multiplayer would like keep you in the same room together, give you a shared goal, give you scoring towards doing things in that goal, like maybe bonuses if you help each other, or punishment if any one of you falls. So you have an incentive for everybody to stick together. Helldivers 2 comes to mind. So yeah.
Good points. So I like that you're getting called out for your League of Legends play.
So funny thing about that, I actually haven't played League since the latest update dropped because they added the anti-cheat Vanguard, and I don't have a problem with Vanguard. I have a problem with Vanguard's installation. So just to explain, Vanguard is a kernel level anti-cheat. There are many things you can say about that. I'm going to ignore that entire topic. There is one thing, though, which is some users have reported that when they have installed it, their computer got bricked or their web browser stopped working or anything of that sort. Now, I use my machine for work. I don't like reformatting my machine if anything goes wrong. Therefore, I am not going to install it on my machine. I have a Mac. I installed it on the Mac. I don't have a mouse for the Mac, so I can't play on the Mac. The only thing I can do is enter the store.
Oh, yeah.
Yay. So that's something in progress. Whenever I pass by like a hardware store, I'll probably buy a cheap mouse that I can use on the Mac, and then I get to play League again. But other than that, for the foreseeable future, no League for me.
Yeah, that's one of the tough things when you have like a shared system for work and home stuff, because you kind of gotta you have to be much more cautious when you're working on that.
It's not necessarily a shared machine for work and game stuff. It's more like I don't want my machine bricked. I'd much rather be in a clean slate state where I can say, okay, I just created this machine. I'm going to install it, see that it works. And then if it doesn't, I can go back like almost no time at all and keep doing whatever I was doing.
Yeah. Well, I just meant that you get that risk of like, you can't just go do that right now, because if it does brick it, like you literally can't work for a while and it's a pain in the ass. Like I run into the exact same problem, and I'm like, all right, time to dig out an old computer for a little while to get this figured out. So always a pain, but nice. Well, let's see. There were a couple other questions I wanted to take real quick. We answered that one already. Oh, there was one from the Bull earlier about Ray browser and web GPU stuff, and he was wondering about what type of games fit in best with that ecosystem. And I don't know a whole lot. It'd probably be good to actually maybe get one of them on and have them talk about it. But from what I understand, the types of games that they think will be successful are medium scale multiplayer games that have longer play times where people get in and play for a little while. It seems to be the kind of thing that they think will be successful in web GPU stuff. I am a little curious, so what you guys all think about web GPU. Do you think that it's likely that games are going to start moving over to that, or long-term games will move to that, or do you think something else will come and change it all again, or any predictions?
No predictions, except that I feel like it's hell to work with. So just on a conceptual level, you end up basically with a web page that plays the whatever you can do in the editor of Unity. If we're talking Unity, I'm not sure. We are talking web GPU for Unity stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would mainly test on an editor and like, okay, you have a web browser as a shell, and because it's a web browser thing, I assume that you don't have to build it for multiple platforms, but you're accruing whatever the cost of whatever runs that shell has. So I don't see a main benefit because you can just build to the platforms. As for serialization and deserialization issues, web tends to be pretty much difficult to work with on any aspect other than just running whatever is internal to the program. So if you want to do anything more advanced, you're kind of screwed. And I don't love that when I can't do whatever I need to do to create the best gameplay experience. So
anybody else got thoughts, predictions?
It sounds intriguing, but I remember when Silverlight was the successor to Flash, and everything was going to be Silverlight. And I even developed a game using Silverlight. Now it's gone. So, I don't know, but this does seem promising. So I don't know. I'll take a wait and see attitude.
I wait and see on this things like this too.
Yeah, for me,
So
yeah,
go
for
ahead.
me the same. And the Flash was popular when we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have it each time by our side that we can just take and play any game from it, download it quickly. Many of our casual players that played Flash games, I think, now plays on more on mobile than on PC. Yeah, PC players just download bigger games and play bigger things. It should be games that you can play at work, so something that's simple and quick to play, not something that you will play longer. Because if you will be playing longer, what's about downloading a game and taking it from Steam and don't have any heat from the browser and stuff like that? Yeah. And if these games will be just played on mobile, then on Android I can see it. On Apple devices, I think they will be fighting it as much as they can because they lose their 30% from the App Store. Yeah,
Just like they did with Flash.
it's
You
the
think
same
they'll
as they
fight
did with
it?
Flash. Yeah.
So there is one more thing to say here, which is you can create non-game things with Unity, and that's where WebGPU would help you if you want to use Unity. But the circle of things that you want to use with Unity that aren't games and things that you can do with other app platforms that aren't better than Unity is like almost zero. So if you're not making a game, you're better off using something that's just straight up .unity for the most part, because most applications like wouldn't need a dedicated rendering GPU thing that you mainly wouldn't want to run on a web shell anyways. So I don't see much of a space to work there. And if you are making something that needs like the actual dedicated GPU stuff, do you actually need a web shell? Can't you just make an app dedicated for whatever hardware you're working on?
Yeah, especially I have also a problem with timeline. Yeah, because it looks that it will be something big in the next few years. Yeah, but the same we have AI generative 3D. With what NVIDIA is showcasing, they will be able to generate live games in also several years, up to 10 years. Yeah. So we have something that just generates everything versus some API that we have to use only on web.
Oh, that's fair. It'd be, it's a lot of stuff going on. We got to talk about that AI thing too. Do you all want to get into that now?
We can.
I think it would be interesting. Everybody, if you're here in chat, let us know what you think of the new OpenAI announcement that happened on Monday. If you haven't seen it, I don't think we'll play it here, but anybody want to explain what it was and describe how excited and thrilled they were, Andrew?
So I was not personally excited and thrilled. I was annoyed. But if you haven't seen the video, go watch. There's a bunch of videos, but the main one that they're showing is some guy talking to OpenAI's, 4.0, I guess is their
for Omni, yeah.
For Omni, yeah. And it's a female voice by default. You can change the voices, but by default it's a female voice, and it's much more human-like in many ways. I play it for my friend. She was like, "Oh, it sounds more like a human." I found it to be annoying. Some people apparently found it to be more sexy and alluring. And I was thinking about this because I didn't. And then I see like articles being written about it, like in newspapers. And I'm like, okay, clearly some people did. And I thought this is an interesting phenomenon. Like the AI voice is something that you fill in. You don't have another person there acting out. Like if somebody's acting sexy, that changes the way you're going to hear their words. If someone's not, and there's more to it in an AI voice, you just have the voice. And so you have to fill in all the blanks. Not saying that it says something about the listener, but it kind of says something about the listener and how they react and how they interpret that voice and the emotions behind the voice. There's no emotions behind the voice.
No, they try to make it sound like there are, though. They certainly add inflection that they didn't have in previous versions and stuff.
but then you have to interpret what it means. I was annoyed because I was imagining having to call a customer service line and having to deal with a stupid AI voice trying to be like a human, delaying the time it takes me to talk to an actual human to get my problem resolved. Or to do a Google search, be like, hey, can you find how to make an apple pie, a recipe for an apple pie? And then having the AI Google say, oh, that's interesting. You're cooking a pie for your family, huh? That's really cool. Let me see what I have for you before it actually shows me the results. I'm like, just show me the results, you know? As a utility, an AI is a tool. And sometimes I can see value in having a human-like voice. I'm sure there's value for some people in having a sexy AI voice. But the way I interpreted it was like, this is annoying.
Yeah, what's going to happen is it's going to be on a robot body very soon.
Oh God! Well, then I can
very soon that is going to be attached to a robot body that's walking around and talking to you.
Yeah, because it can see now too. That's the other big thing. You can use the camera and it can see and be like, "Oh, I like the clothes you're wearing."
Yeah,
big boy.
I like the clothes you're wearing too, Andrew.
Yeah. Hey, Pappy.
Yeah. So just to very quickly pass over this topic. So ChatGPT for Omni was displayed live DM, and it had multiple aspects that it showed. One was the voice, as you mentioned, the inflection, changing the way it speaks based on request. So you can ask it to talk robotically or more excitedly or theatrically or whatever. You can also enable your camera, point it at a thing, and it has some memory context of what it has seen recently and what it is seeing right now, and it can comment on what it is seeing. So kids can use it to solve math equations, like they have a personal teacher. Okay. It also is better at most tasks, from what I understood, than whatever was the previous version. That said, I don't think this is like anything too major. It's just like increased in quality of life. Some people prefer having something that has a humanoid inflection, so it sounds less alien to them and they won't get repelled by it. Another thing is the comment that you made about not liking the confirmation that it sends back at you that this is what you wanted. It's actually a feature that's meant to actually validate that it's following the right request, because now you can interrupt it, and if it's doing the wrong thing, you can say, actually, I asked for the wrong thing, when you hear it back at you. Because some people are not good at catching when they misspeak or when they ask for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So the ability to interrupt the AI, say, hey, actually, this is what I want, this is what it's trying to do. Now, I do agree, when you are very convicted in what you want to do, it's pretty annoying to wait on the confirmation. So yeah, that's basically the gist of it. You can basically run an almost runtime conversation with it and interrupt each other. Sometimes the AI interrupts you, as it was showing live.
And the responses are faster, which I appreciate as well. That was when I had my mom use the voice chat months ago, and she, you know, she's 80, so she definitely didn't get it. And the response time was an issue because she would talk, and then by the time the AI would respond, my mom would start talking again because she thought it didn't hear her or something, and it was all bad.
I mean, my mom should forget what she asked it by the time it got back to her. Have you used the typing version, by the way? Sorry to interrupt, but the typing one on 4.0?
I haven't tried it yet. I also want to point out that one of the biggest things that would happen previously is that if you asked it for something and it would start a long speech, you had no ability to interrupt it. This is like a huge quality of life increase by the fact that you can interrupt it now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hopeful that you know, the implementations of this allow for brevity, for skipping things and being like, just skip that. I don't want to listen to you know, or
this is the kind of thing that you can actually request in advance. So ChatGPT in general, if you tell it in advance, only respond with X and don't do anything else, usually it would follow that command. So you can clean up that, and you can also add a pre-filled context or memory of what you want. So it's one of the options in ChatGPT where you can basically have this on permanently. So you don't have to ask for it every time.
Yeah, that's good for ChatGPT, but I'm thinking like when companies use ChatGPT and use this tech to do their
Their own
automations,
stuff.
that's where I'm like, okay, I don't want to call up, I don't know, some random company and have to listen to, already we have to listen to many minutes of automations saying things, and it's boring, but at least they generally get to the point pretty fast. But this one, if it adds extra stuff in order to feel like a human, I'm just going to be very annoyed.
Just interrupt it and say skip.
If they enable that, my favorite thing on the calls now is just to start saying operator a bunch, and the good ones will quickly get you to a human, but the bad ones will say I'm sorry, and then they'll start over again. Like, fuck. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's been interesting. I've been playing with it a bit too, and the new one I would say is a bit better at code, but it's still definitely not perfect. Like I've asked it a bunch of questions, and it gets stuff wrong pretty consistently still, and misunderstands my context pretty often.
I only asked 2 questions and it failed at both of them. So, in its defense, I ask complicated things. I don't need the simple answers.
Yeah. But the AI that I have been using still consistently, and been meaning to do a video on this. I probably do it this weekend or next week. Is the JetBrains Writer one, the stuff that's just built in to the editor, and it's again not so much to solve problems, but really just as kind of like a typing speed up. It's saving me a bunch of time in my actual typing. Like I put in a thing and it just kind of knows what I want. If I name my methods right, it often writes out the next 4 or 5 lines of code and just speeds me up. So it's been super handy there.
Yeah, JetBrains has some great stuff. In Rider specifically, you can add like a lot of templates. Back when I was working on Dots, trying it out, I would add a lot of custom templates to quickly type like a whole class that runs a job in a certain batch, like in a certain way, almost immediately by just typing the name of what I need in like 1 or 2 components, and immediately I would get whatever I needed. It would drastically reduce iteration time because if you want to add a new thing, you can just immediately like add component projectile velocity with float free, and boom, done.
Yeah. Now I feel like it does that without you having to even set anything up. Just from like watching you do something 1 or 2 times, it starts to kind of automatically guess, often correct what it is you're going to do there. So yeah,
because
cool.
Style is pretty evident in a few words when you think about it. So if you have like 5 or 6 classes, it can usually create the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th.
Yeah. It's pretty good. I've found that it seems to pick stuff up really good. There was one other question here I wanted to take, and then we get going in just a few and figure out who keeps calling me. I think it's from the one I got crashed into. But Dom was asking about the new default input action assets for the Unity 6 preview and wondering if anybody else has used it. I'm curious about the input system here, and also if you all had checked out the new Cinemachine camera stuff yet. I think there was a little bit of discussion, but everybody that hasn't seen it yet should probably know a little bit about it. But yeah, have you guys played with this input stuff, the new asset mapping?
So I haven't, but I understand what it is. Basically, up until now, when you made anything with the input system package, just importing it into projects, you did not have a default input action asset, but the Unity package itself contained such an asset, so you could select it, but you could not edit it. And now they have default one that's like pretty available to you, and I think it's set globally as a fallback if you don't have anything. So you can replace it and you can remove it, if I recall. I haven't actually checked that version of input system yet because I'm working on projects that I didn't mind input system as much. But it's basically just a convenience thing to save you the time that it takes to create your own asset or duplicate whatever is in the package, because assets within the package don't support duplication that easily. So just providing that to you is better.
Anybody else played with it? What about the Cinemachine camera stuff? I played the Cinemachine 3 that just recently came out for everybody, or 3. I think it's like 3.02 or something like that. I've lost track.
You did a video on that, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, so I imported it. I checked the source code. It has some nice things. It has some things I dislike? Question mark. It's just it's mostly a demo distaste kind of thing. It does do something very interesting that I think is worth praising, which is, first off, it works in any render pipeline when you import it instead of having to download something separately to make it work, from what some other packages are doing. But one of the demos is showing how you can make objects between the camera and the character invisible. And that specific demo scene only works if you are on the built-in render pipeline. And they will tell you that in the description text that you can expand, but they will not explain it like if you aren't expanding that text box, and you'll just see a demo that isn't working. So that was a bit funny.
I saw that one not working, and I did not figure out why. I was like, I'll just keep going.
It was very simple. So they basically used a shader for the effect, so it had no gameplay script stuff almost at all. And the shader basically said, hey, if you're within the path to the character in the camera, just cull out the pixels, like reduce opacity, I think it was. You can do that in many different ways, by the way. That's actually something that I can get into a whole rant on if you want.
But there's just not an equivalent done in the URP HDRP one yet?
Correct. It was a manually written shader that's not compatible with URP and HDRP or SRP, to be clear. And they didn't use shader graph, which can create built-in shaders. So I have no idea why they didn't.
Eat your own dog food, people.
I mean, I was just glad to see the new camera setups and the controls. I really like the way that Cinemachine 3 is kind of split out, more just regular components instead of that different sub-component system. And I liked that it came with a bunch of character and camera controllers out of the box. And I feel like it would be nice if some of that was even like got more love and became more of a first-class citizen. So you actually had like a third person and first person character controller that was built into Unity, not a package that works with certain versions.
On that note, that code is actually written kind of well and kind of annoying at the same time. So just to explain, there is a character controller script in the Cinemachine demos. And in those Cinemachine demos, they show you a lot of ways on how you can manipulate the camera, one of which being a camera on a 3D planet. Now, the way they did it is a way I disagree with, because they basically hacked it for the lower hemisphere and the upper hemisphere of the planet. And on top of that, they're basically using a raycast down from the character to find the point that sets the floor normal. So basically, as you walk across the sphere, you get farther from the floor. The ray finds the floor that's now of a new vertical surface area, and then it sets your gravity to that. This works, and it lets you also step on that moving cube, I think it was there. But there are a few things that I would have improved. First off, because the character is using basically a sphere collider, you can use a sphere cast instead of a raycast. You can also do some few other things to make it a bit more stable, because if you got near the cube as it's moving, the character would start jittering. That's because you don't get constant flooring vectors, and there is no smoothing to that. The hacking of the hemispheres isn't necessary if you just work properly with quaternions. I know because I made a character that did this before, so I'm not like talking trash just because. There are things that you could have improved in the case of like giving people properly working asset. It's also using the default character controller, which has its own issues, but I'm not gonna stomp them on that. It does the job to show what it needs to do. One thing I did like is that they showed the character being able to sprint, changing the camera when the character sprints, having a camera that's like on the side that you can actually focus as a shooter, third-person shooter kind of ADS mode, aim down sights. So those are things that people would want to know how to do, and they did those extremely cleanly, so I have no problems with them there. And other than that, it shows all the essentials, like how do you move between cameras, how do you do everything together. It was.
Yeah.
It's a pretty great package as long as you don't look at the character controller specifically.
Yeah, I felt like it was pretty good, and then even the character controller is not perfect, but it's better than what you get out of the box with everything else in Unity. It was still like the best thing they've done so far, and I really think it would be beneficial to just have like a character controller package that was built in and actually just kind of dealt with some of these things out of the box, so that people, getting in and building a game don't have to go figure one out, download one, or buy one just to do basic stuff. I don't know. I feel like it would be good. Just turn one of these sample projects into an actual thing that's supported.
I actually ironically say that character controller runs better than the character controller package, which is its entire thing. It doesn't actually show you anything else other than being a character controller, so it's kind of sad.
You're talking about that old one from like 2020 that got abandoned?
Yeah.
Or didn't get abandoned. It only works in a certain version as a template. Then you can download it from the asset store if you know to download it from the asset store. Yes. That one. Well, cool. Anybody got any other topics? I don't see any other really big pressing questions I wanted to jump into. So if anybody's got anything, we can take it. If not, we can head out for next and come back next week.
So I guess there is one more topic if you guys want to go into it. Over the past week or so, there have been multiple posts on the Unity forum from Unity developers talking about this next state of things and where we are and where they're going with different packages. So there's been one for the networking, there's been one for ProBuilder, there was another one for the new network service thing that they're doing for distributed authority that I mentioned last time I was around. Just to summarize for everybody, they put a lot of resources out there. If you want to start getting into networked games, the post about that would basically give you everything that is official that they've done, and also talk about where they're heading. There was also one about dots. In dots, they're basically saying, hey, we're seeing that there are a lot of stuff that need to be improved. We're getting rid of the things that didn't work. We're improving the things that did work so they're easier to create, specifically reducing the amount of boilerplate code you need to do to get things running and giving you better access. So, for example, in attempt to make game objects and entities work better together, they're improving how the game object and the transform components work under the hood. Other than that, so you can now reference them. They also added managed object reference, I think they called it, which is basically an easier way to access things on the game object side without making the jobs run in a worse capacity. Because if I recall, you had to create like a managed job. I don't recall very well here, but basically they solved that requirement. Other than that, they've seen that aspects have a lot of junk under the hood and they don't live up to their potential, so they're getting rid of that. They also mentioned something completely unrelated that I'm kind of a fan of. They're thinking of getting rid of the cloth component.
Huh. That seems weird.
Yeah, it's one of those things that is like the correct thing to do. They have not updated it in years. It runs horribly. Most assets are actually incompatible with it. It's very unfriendly to customization. I have a lot of bad things to say about the cloth component, and I've tried every possible solution on the asset store, so I'm coming from a place of understanding it. So I am a fan of that. Other than that, in networking, specifically for netcode for game objects, they are working on netcode for game objects 2.0. They have updated the license, which was previously MIT. It's now the Unity Companion license. This is something that I'm not big on because it changes the terms from something that was more friendly to something that is less friendly going forward. I do recommend that everybody reads it if they plan to create a multiplayer game. Other than that, distributed authority is being worked on, and they created a new service that is basically a cloud-hosted server for distributed authority, so that when you enter that server, you can still have distributed authority, so every player gets authority and controls their own side of the things in the world. But there is something that saves on communication, because if you don't use that, you basically have to transmit with the host. Now, just to explain this a bit better, player A wants to send a message to player C, they have to go for player B, which is the host. If you have the relay server, then they all just go for the relay server. I don't recognize this as a main advantage, but
no, the other thing that those distributed authority systems give you too is persistence. So those characters can be persisted temporarily kind of in data and then sent back out. So players that join later will get all of that stuff directly from the server. It ends as kind of like a point for that. And then also kind of like a relay. So you have an open endpoint that they can all get to instead of a specific host. It works as like a lightweight replacement for a server. But for Unities, I'm really curious to see where they come in pricing wise, because I mean, the only way it ends up being a good option is if they drastically undercut Photon's shared service, which is basically the same thing. They do pretty much the same thing there.
They're not doing the same thing.
No,
Photon offers you way more.
So yeah, that's kind of what they offer that service. Plus, there's a bunch of other stuff on there, but the shared mode is essentially the distributed authority mode.
No. So this is what I'm saying. In Photon, you have prediction and reconciliation to a degree.
Yes. Lots of other stuff on top of it too. Don't get me wrong. Just talking on the distributed authority part alone, like they have to drastically be way cheaper or something to compete there.
Yeah. So they have a public forum post about it that's like live as of this weekend. Basically, they're saying if you want to try to use distributed authority now, you have to use the latest version of the package, and you have to install the new multiplayer services package, and you have to send us an email with your project ID so that we give you backend access to complete the setup. Now, I have something that I'm very annoyed about that I would like to mention here. It's a bit of a hot take, but I think there is actual malice in what has been done to the package. So, just to explain this very clearly, up until now, netcode for game objects 2.0 is still experimental, but it was in an earlier version of the experiment, and distributed authority code was already available. It basically came as a drop down on the network manager. So you would add the network manager component as you always do, and it would now show you that it's in client and server mode, and you'd click it and you'd see a distributed authority mode. You click that, and now everything in your project that is networked has 3 buttons for distributable, transferable, and requires permission, which are things that are basically tied to the new distributed authority networking shenanigan. That works in 2.0.0 experimental 2, and I'm basically going to call it XP2 from now on. And in XP2, it's not finished, but it works. And not only that it works, it doesn't need anything else. You can just use it and go on your merry way. As of, I think, 1 hour and 30 minutes ago, or 2 hours at this point, they actually uploaded experimental 3, and one of the GitHub changes there is a chore that makes the package require the services package in order to show you distributed authority mode. That means that if you update the experimental package, your project can now no longer be distributed authority, unless you enable that other package. Now, as of right now, it's only using an if-def, so you can probably just hack in the if-def and just make it work. But clearly, they're intending for both packages to be used together. They're trying to kind of shoehorn you into seeing what that services package is and like making sure that the service package is actually installed on the project and connected to a project ID at some point, I guess. I don't love that because distributed authority worked without any of that. And the package
Oh, because is that the service? Is that like the global services package that lets you connect to all the stuff?
No, it's just the services package for multiplayer. It's something new that you have to register with them for.
Oh, okay. It's not. I was thinking of because they have that one that does like all the services, the combined one, which is nice because it's super lightweight. But it sounds like this is a different one. I haven't seen this.
Yeah, let me just send you a link for that. You can show it. So it's this one. And again, I'm not trying to say that Unity's developers are bad. A lot of them are very dedicated. You can see that in their work. Some of them are very active on GitHub as well. You can actually hold conversations with them through issues. But this change just sits ill with me.
This is the package that I like. The multiplayer one, because it's like have you looked at that one? Unless I'm misremembering it, that one was basically just like a lightweight wrapper around all their web calls. So you just had to do it in one spot. It had authentication and everything else, and it's probably requiring it so that it can tie in and use the authentication or some other thing that's in there that used to, because they used to have like copies of all that shit, at least from what I could tell, like split into all the separate packages, and they were putting it into.
We're talking about the same package because this is
experimental
and new.
It was it was a new experimental package. Last time I used it was 0.2. It looks like it's on 0.4. But it was just like a lightweight wrapper that made all of the web requests, so you didn't have to do that yourself. And it wrapped them all up. So it took like the authentication package, the lobby, and all of those, and all they were was wrappers to those calls on their API. So and it just put them all into things. So you had like you create a client, give it the access level that you want, and then you could call into any of those services from that thing. My guess is they probably put it into that so that it could use the generic authentication thing in there. But I don't really know. So just guess. But say I like that one. It was much better than having to get a package for every single service when you're actually using their services, like authentication. Then you got to go grab a lobby one, and then having to update those packages and keep them in sync was a pain in the ass. So having one, since they're literally just wrappers on web requests, was pretty nice. But yeah,
but I'm not sure why you still need this installed when it works without it, because you just need a Unity transport.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that unless it's they want to. I guess because authenticating into their services stuff somehow. I don't know.
Yeah. So I have tried to ask on the forums before. I've seen the requirement being added, but they basically said when they are paired together, it lets you have a cloud-hosted service, which basically means, hey, we're building the client, we're sending it up to some random computer. Here, have fun. Up to 25 people can join at a time. And I'm like, I don't need that. I'm iterating with multiplayer play mode on my own PC. Let me use Unity Transport. So yeah. That's basically it for the networking thing. Again, on the dots thing, I think that they're doing something very good there. I am still waiting until working on a modern C#.NET base in Unity becomes a thing, because I'm frankly tired of the extra compilation time that you have to wait on when you're using Burst. It's gotten to a point that the last time that I've tried to use a dots project, I straight up disabled Burst so I can iterate more quickly. Because unless you're making whole armies, you don't necessarily need the performance, but sometimes it's just cleaner to write in dots style. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to go check out some of those posts. I did see some updates on multiplayer stuff and on the source control. Some new stuff coming soon. Talk about that hopefully next week. For everybody who's still with us, don't forget to like and subscribe, and come back next week. Would be on the weekend. Anybody got any other final things you wanted to mention or talk about before we go?
One more thing, and that's something that's been relevant to all of us as we're talking in a friend group. ProBuilder 5 versus ProBuilder 6 is a thing that is discussed very heatedly across developers. For those of you who aren't in the loop, in ProBuilder 5 and below, there was a certain way that menus worked that has basically been put in your face that shows you all your possible options, and now you get to work with them. And if you're not in the right context mode, nothing happens when you click something because you have to be in the right context mode to do it. But when they updated to ProBuilder 6, everything started using the contextual menus and overlays on the Unity scene view. And because of that, they got rid of some menus. And the new experience is far harder to get into if you're not comfortable with the overlays. And the documentation is behind, and there are some bugs that make the experience way worse. So it's been difficult to get into. And because this has been brought to ProBuilder team's attention, Gabriel from Unity, one of the developers on ProBuilder, made a 15-minute video showing you how ProBuilder 6 works. And I want you all to know that there is an actual video on YouTube called PB5 versus PB6, which is basically the video of the developer explaining everything. Again, from Gabriel Williams on YouTube. So I recommend you go look at it. And there's also a discussion being held under the world building section of the Unity forums. I've sent the thread. Actually, wait, without the post link. There we go. If you can share that, Jason. So yeah, I just wanted everyone to be able to see it because the developer is actually trying to help people out in understanding how to use ProBuilder 6 better, understanding what are the actual benefits of this change, and making sure you get comfortable with how they're trying to make sure that things are going to be with Unity going forward. Because from my understanding, they're trying to make more asset store developers use the overlay system as well, so everything is contextual and you don't get bloated menus on your Unity editor.
I still stand by my dislike for the overlays. I've never liked them. I never will.
I'm right with you. I'm right with you.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Not
I
a
don't like the
ProBuilder thing
overlays.
specifically. I just never liked any of the overlays. It's always driven me nuts.
And I don't like them from both sides, as a store creator and as a Unity user.
Yeah, and I pulled up Drew's comment. That video helped me because it wasn't until I watched that video and got 12 minutes in that I finally figured out how to select a face in ProBuilder 6. And I'd reinstalled it 3 times, and I could not find the face selection until I got to that part. And I was like, oh, there's a button up there that I had no idea was a new button that I had to toggle because I hate those little toolbar things anyway, and I generally just ignore them. And try to right click and hide them and remove them because they irritate me. They're just sitting in my face.
Yeah. On my end, it's a problem of discoverability. So now you don't see anything until you're already selecting the right thing. So you have to know that you have to select the right thing. That's tribal knowledge. Tribal knowledge is something that I'm very much against. If you watch me ever talk about Terraria's code, there's literally systems upon systems where there's like a weird check here and nobody knows what it is, so we have to start figuring it out. And sometimes we would remember some bug from 5 years ago where this line makes exact sense for that, and you can't trace it back with git blame because there's been so many commits iterating on that code that they have moved it at one point, and then the entire thing is like blaming whatever newer commit is. So you don't want tribal knowledge. You want everything to be discoverable easily. You want things to show up contextually only if you are entirely sure that the user it's going to be of interest to the user. Otherwise, show it in general. One more thing that frustrates me about the overlays is specifically, and that's not just ProBuilder, that's anything overlay, they get rid of text. Now, there is a statement that I make whenever I work on games, which is people don't read. And that's fine that people don't read. People are, when they're playing games, they're here for entertainment. But if you're a developer, you're trying to get things done, you will read. This is why you should also read documentation, by the way. And when you read, you want to read what is relevant to you. Now, previously, ProBuilder would give you all the tools with their names. So if you've never heard about something, you can Google it. But now you see an icon. What does a circle with an arrow do? What does a circle with 2 arrows do? What do 2 circles do? What is a half blue, half yellow circle do? I don't know. Let's start hovering over every single one and hope that they have a freaking tooltip, because some of them don't. So yeah, basically, they need to put back the text. They really need to put back the text, even if it's optional, even if it's on by default. They need to give us back the text.
You don't want to memorize a bunch of new icons?
It's not about memorizing them. Yeah, I could memorize them. I don't have a problem.
I
memorizing
couldn't.
them. I want to have discoverability of new things. If something shows up and I am using a 4K 27-inch screen and I'm sitting about half a meter away from it, I will not be able to notice that this one icon is 2 pixels different from the other icon.
In my stuff, I realize that a lot of people will have no idea what my stuff does out of the box because it's brand new things for them. So I like to put tooltips, of course, on everything with a little icon indicating that there's something of interest. So it's not just a variable name; it's a variable name with a little icon that shows there might be a tooltip. But also, I will often put additional help text that you can turn off. So it's on by default, but there's a toggle you can turn it off if you don't want it to clean up the stuff. But that gives more information about what each section is meant for. And then, of course, links to the documentation as well that are very prominent and colorful, so you can clearly see that it exists.
You're a good citizen.
Yeah, that's a good way to do things. Sometimes you would call it over diligence. Some people do with less, but better is better. Sorry, more is better usually when you're trying to give somebody tools.
And the stuff that really does clutter, which is the help boxes that are just there, you can turn them off. So you don't need them once you're up to speed, but they're there for everybody who does need them.
There is, if Story were here, I'm going to project my image of him on this conversation. He generally repeatedly talks about how whenever he installs a new application, he would disable everything. So he has the cleanest, most bare bones version of the application when he begins. And then as he needs things, he figures out if they exist there and he toggles them on. I am generally of the opposite side of this spectrum, where I would prefer seeing everything. Information density is perfectly fine. I will read the entire interface before I click anything. And then once I have seen everything that is within my options, I'm going to pick whatever seems best, instead of not knowing what I'm doing and faffing about and hoping that there is some sort of guide. This is actually one thing that frustrates me a lot. If you're going to disable the in-your-face things, make sure that the documentation is up to date, because you need people to know how to do something. The worst part that you get as an asset user is when you don't know how to use the asset. And that's usually because there is no guidance on the asset. This is true whether you're using an asset from the asset store or an asset created by Unity themselves. So
yeah, I mean, that's the developers of these things, and Unity is probably in on this too. We often know how to use something and we don't realize what it's like to be brand new to that tool, even if you're an experienced developer, what it's like to be brand new, but especially for an inexperienced developer to be brand new to the tool. I remember years ago there was an asset that did some really great stuff with iOS and Android. This is 2014, 2015. And the developer would only write in C#, wasn't available in JavaScript. And I was at the time using the Unity script JavaScript variant. And they were very aggressive that they wouldn't help me. They're like, nope, we're not going to help you. It's possible. What you're looking to do is possible, but we won't help you do it. We won't give you any information on how to do it because we don't think you should be doing it. And I'm like, okay, but that's not helpful. And their docs also were very, very, at the time for me, advanced, where if you didn't know certain concepts, you wouldn't be able to understand their docs. On the flip side, I once had to implement Stripe, and Stripe's docs are very user-friendly for people who don't know everything. And that made me feel very good. And I was able to implement Stripe in my website in like a couple hours knowing nothing before that. So
They got very different incentives, right? Like Stripe
Yeah.
doesn't make money until you actually implement their stuff.
that is
The other
true.
people already made the money by the time you're reading the docs.
Yeah, or they don't want to spend the time cost to, I paid them $150 for the thing, and they don't consider, the time it takes for them to help me is worth that $150.
So in regards to the multiplayer question that's sitting here, can we go into it?
Yeah, let's do it while I crunch away.
So it's asking, I'm working on a racing game and I feel like the non-local players don't need all the same components as the local player. The movement controller, for example, is that right? Does anybody have any thoughts on that before I take it? Go for it.
Don't need all the same. I would think that's correct.
You got options. They could have the same components acting differently, or slightly different components, or different variations of components. It kind of depends on how you like to build it, and it also depends, I think, on the game. A racing game, I don't know that I would have very different components. Maybe minor, but in my most recent one, they all have the same components. They just act differently based on who has control over them.
Pavel, got anything?
I don't know how deep I want to go in it. Yeah, I would. For me, it would depend of type of connection you're using, the server type, and so on and so on. Yeah, because peer-to-peer would be different with server authority. That if it would be different. Yeah. So it depends.
Okay. I'm gonna go on the expanded take, if possible. So basically, the answer here is you don't always need the same components, but what you generally try to aim for is that everybody is seeing the exact same information. And to do that, you sometimes do need to run some code locally. So let's create a situation where you have two cars racing. By default, if they were running in the exact same PC, they would both be going in the same time, going up forward. But because lag exists, one will always be behind the other. Your local thing is always going to be more responsive than whatever the other thing is. If you're both playing a game of shootout and you're trying to shoot at each other, if there is lag, you're going to click immediately, and then you're going to see the other person's thing. Now, suppose a projectile is also fired when you click. Your projectile is going to start firing first, and then you're going to see the other projectile moving. If you want to compensate for that, you need to know which code to call to do the compensation, which means sometimes you will want to locally run the character code, and sometimes you will want to run it with extra time padding for the lag. So, for example, with network transforms, if you're just moving with the transform of that other non-local player, they're going to be sliding about, and they're going to be sliding slower than what you're seeing yourself doing. If you get any amount of lag, they're also going to stop in place because they stopped updating their position. There is no concept of velocity when they're doing movement only by syncing their transform position. Now, the Unity netcode for game objects and some other solutions offer like some sort of extrapolation, which is when you stop getting net packets, continue going at the exact same pace forward. That doesn't work if you're adding things like turning, which cars in a racing game would want to do. So if you have a character controller component and you have something driving that character controller component, the proper solution here would be sync the inputs on that thing that drives the character controller so that whenever it gets resynced, it can actually move with the inputs that have been last set. Now, there are a lot of things you can do to polish the experience further, but the idea is if you do that, the car is going to keep driving even if it stops getting net messages or even if it's lagging. And you can also compensate because you know exactly what thing the player is actually trying to do. Without the input information or without the character controller, you do not get to guess what the player is trying to do. You only can guess by the information that you get. So sometimes you do want the same components. Most of the time, I would say even. If you use things like Fishnet, their actual demo example from like I think 1 year ago actually had a thing where you only have a character controller on your character, but non-local players disable that character controller and instead opt to use a sphere collider for complex reasons specific to Fishnet. But I wouldn't recommend that you need that. Also, just a tangent for everybody that's dealing with character controllers, specifically Unity's default character controller. It is a collider. Stop adding an extra collider on top. You don't need a second collider. It's a collider. Use it. It's a kinematic collider. It works. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that was good advice. Sorry, I was eating a very delicious mint while listening to that answer. But yeah, there's a little follow-up. I'll pop it up. But they said that the movement for non-local comes over the network, and it seems like any of those components could be discarded for non-local players. And what you were saying there was really a lot of the time they'll just disable those or have them act differently. So you're passing that input in to those same components. It's just the source of the input is either local or it's the network. So you're not really having to change anything. You can sometimes have things that are local only, but most of the time you don't generally need it.
It's complicated because when you're saying components that have to do with player input, you sometimes do want them because you want to be able to resimulate at times. It's not that you don't want it. For example, in Terraria, we actually simulate quite a lot, including when your character is aiming, because when you're shooting with a gun, we need to know where you actually aimed at. If I am imagining you using only Unity default components, so Network Transform will give you some extrapolation, position, rotation, and scale, and Network Rigibody can also set kinematic state. It doesn't actually sync velocity. That's a big problem that I have with distributed authority right now. And you do have one more thing that I'm blanking on. But yeah, anyways, you don't have a lot that would walk out of the box for doing anything more. Network Animator, that's the one. So Network Animator actually syncs all the network parameters. And you specifically need to use it a bit differently from Network Animator, so from the default animator, wherein it can't detect when you set triggers. So you actually have to call a special Network Animator.set trigger instead of Animator.set trigger. But that's basically it. So those three components, Network Transform, Network Rigibody, and Network Animator, they will do most of the job for you if you don't care about polishing the experience at all. I recommend you do include the character controller and you include the input component and you sync the input. You don't have to try to poll for input on the other players because obviously the input comes from the network component. But the other components that you wrote can still ask that input, hey, what are you doing right now?
Yeah, and split that input off of that character for the local machine, and then pass in whichever input, the network or the local, to the character, whichever one applies. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we're out of questions and just about out of time. I don't know. Let's see what just popped up. Oh, okay. Okay. I've seen that too. I'll check that out later. Anyway, yeah, I wanted to wrap stuff up, let everybody know that next week we'll be back on the weekend. So I think it'll probably be Sunday, same time of day, just Sunday. It may end up being Saturday, but we'll figure it out and see what day works best for everybody. Whichever day can get the most people, we'll go with that one. In the meantime, don't forget to go grab the free Publisher of the Week asset, that 30 for 30 deal, and the game modules. And then also, I forgot to link somewhere here. The game architecture course is still open. If anybody wants to register, the info is down below. And then we're going to have a call this weekend. It's either going to be tomorrow or Sunday. I'm figuring that out this afternoon, and it'll be scheduled for our next student call. I'm just talking to the students on Monday about it, and we're moving it over to the weekend as well. But the date's still not locked in. I've got some votes on it. I've got to get the final votes. Anyway, yeah, we'll be back next week. Anybody got any other final words?
Terraria had its 13th anniversary of release yesterday. So woo!
Nice.
Yeah.
Congrats. That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, we actually released the first final update as a gift to the community. So if you own Terraria, you can right-click and go into a beta branch, and you can choose to play version 1.1.2, the first final update.
Yeah, and if you don't own it, you should just go grab it. And now Yora is doing updates for the Steam Deck, it sounds like. So go grab it on your Steam Deck. I have it on my Steam Deck. The controls were a little bit painful. I'm curious, what was the big thing that the main change that you were making that you felt was the first one?
So I'm not able to talk about it because
okay,
but yeah,
understandable. Cool.
All right.
Well, go grab it and find out right when it comes.
If it comes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right.
We're doing quite a lot for like the Steam Deck, specifically when you are working on inputs and you have a touch panel and also all the gamepad controls. The game has been specifically made so that you have a keyboard mode and a gamepad mode. But if you're using both, it's like you're keeping on switching between devices. So we actually had to create a third mode that is like a combined mode for the deck when we worked on it. That was fun and painful when I didn't own a deck.
Yeah, I only ever use mine when I'm traveling, but I use it every time I travel. It's like it's great for that. Otherwise, I just need a bigger screen. But anyway, yeah, thanks again, everybody. Thanks all of you for being here and everybody for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff. And if you got questions for the next show, just drop them down below, and we'll try to remember to look at those and take them. All right. See everybody later.